Hi, I'm Lana Gordon, and I'm talking about dangerous fads and adolescent risk-taking behaviors. So I have no significant financial relationships to disclose based on this educational activity, and I will not be talking about off-label clinical uses of drugs or devices during this presentation. We are going to, however, learn how high-risk behaviors that adolescents are participating in, what they are, and how they may be impacting the morbidity and mortality that we know occurs in the adolescent population. And we want to teach you all how to best screen for these high-risk behaviors, including fad behaviors that are described. So this is YRBS data. YRBS is the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance. It's put out by the CDC every other year, and it actually identifies how adolescents are most likely to have unintended consequences. And usually it's adolescent unintentional injury, homicide, and suicide are the top 3 causes of death in teenagers. So the nice thing about that is that we can actually screen for these things and prevent them. So that's the positive news. The hard news is that we don't always know what it is that we need to screen for. The way that we do that in adolescent medicine, and when you're seeing an adolescent patient, even if you're not an adolescent specialist, is through the HEADDSSS exam. So there are many different iterations of the HEADDSSS exam, but it's basically a snapshot of thinking about a teen, their environment, the people they're in, the places they're interacting with, and then how they may be encompassing risk. So teens have always had their own language, and it changes very rapidly in comparison to the adults in their lives. And so a lot of times as adults, we look at what teens are saying or what they're writing and we say, gosh, I don't even know what that is. So I always joke and say it's teen to me. So an example of that would be, for instance, what do you think OC means? And you've got a few options here to mull over. And so you may be confused. You may have never heard the term OC. You may have never seen it used in a text message, but it actually means open crib, which means that the parent or the adult that would be supervising is not present at the time when the event is going to occur. So come to this party this week in OC. But the challenge and what makes teen lingo so confusing is that when I was a teenager, for instance, OC meant Orange County. OC can also mean OxyContin. You may think that it's, it can also mean original character. So there are lots of different abbreviations that could have different meanings. So you can't keep up with all of the different abbreviations that teens are using, but it's nice to know some of the terms that are out there, and then just kind of keeping your lexicon frequently refreshed by looking at things like Urban Dictionary to find out the meaning of things, or if you see something and it doesn't make sense in the context, thinking through that. But it's really important to understand some really concerning text things that you may see. So in thinking about sex, anything that says like thirsty, smashing, Netflix and chill, NIFOC, these are things that are really concerning for a teen who's kind of in this hookup culture, having sex kind of with people they may not know well. Also, sometimes teens give names to things that are concerning habits. So they may be talking about Sue and Deb, and that's suicide and depression. They may be talking about Anna, which is a way to promote anorexic behaviors and avoid being adults figuring this out or the doctor figuring this out. So listening out for those kinds of dialogues. But then there's some specific behaviors that teens may be trying out as a way to get more likes on social media. And so one of those things may be planking. So I want you to think through, what do you think planking might be? And if you guessed B, the game of laying down in a place face down to get a good picture, then you would be correct. So planking actually came up originally in movies that were shot in South Korea and France and in Ireland. It came across the pond in 1994 and then was revitalized in the UK in 2000. But with the advent of Instagram and Snapchat, it really took off in 2011. And so it's really people just placing online, trying to compete for the most unusual, original, or level, or a very difficult place. The challenge, of course, is that these places may be dangerous. They could be dangerous because of location, like a railroad track, or it could be dangerous because of the height, and falling. Additionally, particularly when in combination with drugs and alcohol, teens may pursue even more dangerous locations, or they may actually have additional difficulty or have less awareness of what they're doing and be more likely to injure themselves. So while planking is just one example of a dangerous fad behavior that teens are engaging in, I want you to know that it is not in any way all of the behaviors. But one of the things that you want to do is be very aware of the fad behaviors they might be engaged in. Screen. So if you don't ask teens what they're doing, you won't know. So instead of asking, what do you do with friends, and kind of settling with the answer, oh, I hang out with friends, or I'm on my phone, asking what they're doing on their phone, what they're looking at, what they're interested in. Asking what they're doing with friends, how do they get there, because that may give you a sense of the other kinds of behaviors you might need to ask about. If you don't ask, then they won't tell you. And if you don't understand what something means, ask about it. Check on teen websites regularly or teen magazines. You know, when you're standing in the grocery counter line, just picking up a copy of Teen Vogue or Cosmopolitan or 17 magazine and flipping through to kind of see what teens are doing. Checking out YouTube and places like that are great ways to know kind of what's going on in teens' popular culture at the moment that they may be experimenting with. And then always use your anticipatory guidance that you're giving as an opportunity to counsel for safer behaviors. So another example of that may be something like the Cinnamon Challenge. So most of us have heard of the Cinnamon Challenge, but we may not know how to counsel a teen as to why it could be risky or dangerous. And so what do you think the risk is of participating in the Cinnamon Challenge? And if you guess D, irritation or infection to the lungs, you would be correct. So the challenge is that cinnamon cannot be dissolved in water and it doesn't dissolve in saliva. So as you're trying to swallow this mouthful of cinnamon powder, you end up choking. And then, of course, when you take a breath from choking and coughing, because the cinnamon doesn't dissolve, you actually aspirate more of the cinnamon into the lungs. And there it causes irritation, not just to young people who have chronic lung disease, but also to just young people who are otherwise healthy. So it's become popular because of the social media. So we can think about a number of challenges, the Ice Bucket Challenge, different challenges that had their heyday on social media. But for whatever reason, the Cinnamon Challenge keeps on coming back. And so it's just something to think about. Another common one that you may have remembered from your youth that also seems to resurface a lot is the choking game. So if you guessed A on what the choking game is, then you would be correct. And the choking game is basically a way to try to pass out and then come back to. It's not the passing out that provides the high, it's actually the coming back. The reperfusion causes a rush of oxygen to the brain, and as a result, it causes a little bit of euphoria, which teens enjoy. And so the goal sometimes is to do this alone to see how long they can kind of cause the hypoxia, because the longer that they're able to be out, the better the high afterwards. Choking game is actually scarily performed in more young adolescents, so 9 to 14 years old is the target demographic, and a surprising 15% of young people have participated in some way. It does lead to death, and so these are particularly when played alone. Signs and symptoms that a young person who's been participating in the choking game, if they were found unconscious, might have are petechiae on their face or subconjunctival hemorrhages, as well as other marks on their body that might be consistent with bruising or trauma. Another common thing that teens are doing is alcohol-infused candy. There are YouTube videos that show them step-by-step how to do this. And the thing is that they can infuse candy like Skittles, gummy bears, in hard liquor and consume them in plain view. An adult won't know any different. And it doesn't provide alcohol scent on the breath, so they're allowed to kind of bypass other detection mechanisms. Unfortunately, they could end up having alcohol poisoning because they're consuming a lot more alcohol than they recognize that they're doing. So important to think about. It may be at a party, and so it may be mixed with regular candy, and so a young person may accidentally consume alcohol-infused candy and not realize that they're doing that. So important things to know there. So these are references in case you want to know more about the things that teens are doing. As I said, I found Urban Dictionary to be very helpful, but also Net Sanity and YouTube, and it's just ways to figure out what else is going on in the minds of teens. And then for some of the more clinical information, the CDC and the drugabuse.com websites are very helpful as well. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening. I hope that this information was useful for your practice.